From getting kicked out of hospital for ordering pizza, verbally abusing his doctors, and throwing his urine on the floor, Stephen Assanti is the most hated 600-pound life star ever, and it's with good reason. After I made my James King video, I had no idea how much worse Stephen Assanti would be, with every single comment on that video wanting me to cover him, and I was left completely disgusted by his story. To understand why everyone hates Stephen Assanti, we need to go back to his childhood and discover the trauma which may explain why Stephen is the way he is. Born in 1981, Stephen didn't exactly have the best start in life. His mother was a chronic alcoholic and his parents would constantly argue, subjecting Stephen and his younger brother Justin to a lot of abuse. They ended up getting a divorce when Stephen was just 11 years old, and the young boys went to live with their mother.
At that time, my mom cared more about the alcohol and her boyfriends than us.
This ultimately was a disaster, as their mother would often put partying and her relationships with other men above the boys, with her boyfriends physically abusing her young sons.
My mom's boyfriend was very violent.
I was beaten physically by her boyfriend, but my mom knew and she didn't care.
She would often leave them home alone for days at a time and leave out cold food just for them to eat. This was the first time we seen Stephen's strange behaviour, as Justin recounts that Stephen would eat all of the food that was left for them, without even letting his little brother have a bite.
Every time there was food around, before I can eat it, he would already have gobbled it down.
This is incredibly disturbing to learn and difficult to comprehend. Even at 11 years old, Stephen's lack of concern for his little brother is quite disturbing. Stephen's food addiction has a clear origin story. Left alone for days, food was his only source of comfort. His mother would also use food as a manipulation tactic. Instead of shielding them from the abuse of her boyfriends, she would reward their endurance with sweet treats. In reality, the only thing that Stephen and Justin had to look forward to was food.
Let's go back to my childhood days. How my mom used to leave me and my brother at home and go out clubbing all the time. Mind you, we were young. My mother abandoned me and my brother for the person she's with now.
Stephen began really struggling with his weight as he just couldn't stop eating. By his teenage years, he was significantly overweight. By the time he was 15 years old, he weighed over 300 pounds. In the same year, their mother left one night to start a new life with their boyfriend and never came home. As a result, the boys moved back in with their father. This was incredibly traumatic for Steve, which only catapulted his rapid weight gain. We learn a lot about Stephen's problematic behavior from his father, where he recounts the damage caused by his son's incredible weight. Stephen was so large that he actually cracked the toilet and sink simply by leaning on them. When showing the camera crew around Stephen's childhood bedroom, it's clear that Stephen spent 99% of his time there. Instead of walking 5 meters to the toilet, he would urinate into bottles and leave them on the floor.
The only time he went to the regular bathrooms when he had to go number 2.
Stephen and his father would often get into physical altercations surrounding food, as Stephen would never take no for an answer. One of the worst instances of this was when Stephen actually called the police on his father, who was then arrested. Stephen then said that he would drop the charges if his dad bought him a pizza. Stephen's father reached his boiling point when he found a cupboard in Stephen's room completely full of pizza boxes that he'd ordered and ate in secret. When he confronted Stephen, telling him to stop before it was too late, Stephen brushed him off and asked what they were having for their next meal.
I said, "You serious, dude?" I said, "How do I know you just didn't have a pizza today and you want something to eat again?"
Unable to think about anything other than food, Stephen would threaten to call the police on his family unless they brought him more.
One time my dad and I got an altercation. He hit me, and then I hit him, and I called the police. He got arrested, and he told me to drop the charges, and he would get me a large pizza if I did, and so I did.
This behaviour resulted in Stephen gaining yet another 50 pounds, making him 350 pounds by the time he was 17. At this time, he was eating 6 to 7 large pizzas every single day, and it's at this point we begin to learn that Stephen is incredibly dangerous and manipulative, and he's incapable of having compassion for anyone but himself, even when they are trying to help him. And the worst part, this is only the beginning. But before we look more at the downfall of Stephen, we need to thank today's sponsor, Pi. Pi is an ad blocker like no other, as it doesn't just block annoying ads, it actually allows you to gain a share of the ads that you do want to see. The internet is a genuine cesspit if you don't have an ad blocker, but I'm sure that many of you do already. However, I doubt that your current ad blocker allows you to get rewarded for watching ads that YouTube was going to make you watch anyway. They do this through rewards and cashback, so when you watch ads on my videos, not only do you help support my channel, but you get something in return outside of my gratitude for helping. For everyone else though, you can block the ads so you don't have to see them again. It's also pretty unique in that you can have the standard ad blocker mode, which takes them away before you can see them, or you can actually use a disappearing mode, which lets you see the ads disappear before your eyes, which feels satisfying for some reason. The final thing is the Pi Shopping Companion extension, which automatically finds the best discount codes for you and automatically allows you to collect cash back on items you do purchase, which just seems like a win-win. If you want to give Pi a go, you can visit pi.org/BigCraig by clicking the link in the description. And if you do try it, thank you for supporting the channel. Let's get back into the video and into the insanity of Stephen Assanti's life. In an effort to get back at his mother, Stephen takes to sharing photos and videos of himself online, which he defends because he was so desperate for some attention, even if it was all negative. If you haven't seen My £600 Life, you've probably seen these videos of Stephen Assanti before. In them, Stephen baits and taunts his audience, showcasing all the food he's able to buy, thanks to taxpayers' money.
This video is just for you taxpayers. Thank you for paying taxes.
This is extremely difficult to watch, given that there are people who desperately rely on public welfare due to serious health conditions and other various reasons. It's insulting to the people who actually need these funds and have to rely on it as their last resort. Yet for someone like Stephen Assanti on the other hand, they brag about how much money they get despite not working, which leads to his audience being outraged by his antics. This is especially harmful as Stephen is using hard-working taxpayers' money to fund his overeating, which in turn causes him many health problems, resulting in even more money going into his treatment. Stephen has lived his life like this for a very long time. Moving between his own apartment and his dad's house, his quality of life trends downwards, while the scale keeps going up. By the time he's 30, he's above £600. Moving back in with his father, Stephen continues his abusive tactics, taking his anger out on Justin. Due to his size, he can no longer move his body enough to hit his younger brother, but he emotionally abuses him instead.
Stephen came back home and he was up to his old tricks of abusing me mentally. He couldn't hit me physically because he couldn't get up, but he used to pound on my wall over and over again until I finally gave him what he wanted.
While staying at his father's house, he continues to get in his way, eating his way to immobility. Stephen is transferred to hospital as he becomes bedridden. After a few days in Kent Hospital, Stephen is accepted by Dr. Now as a patient and has been approved for medical transport to Houston. Due to his size, over £700, Stephen has to be transported in the back of a truck, where the pressure of his enormous body breaks one of the legs on the stretcher.
Oh!
What happened?
The bed just hit a big, huge bump and it broke.
The rail came off, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
The whole
broken.
The transport to Houston takes 25 to 30 hours, and Stephen doesn't miss the opportunity to continue his usual food manipulation tactics. He calls his father countless times without even starting with a hello, just demanding for food instead. He manipulates his father by complaining that he feels weak.
I'm feeling very weak, and if something happens to me, you're gonna be very sorry.
Someone of Stephen's size doesn't have to worry about not eating. He clearly shows his delusion here, as he has tricked himself into thinking that the feeling of hunger is a medical emergency. Stephen lies to the nurses that accompany him on the way to Dr. Now, claiming that he hasn't eaten at all, so that he can have multiple breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. His attitude is unbelievable. It's clear that he hasn't even begun to think about losing any weight. Upon arrival at the hospital, Stephen appears optimistic. On the scale, he weighs 730 pounds, and Dr. Now immediately puts him on a 1,000 calorie a day diet in order to drop his weight down to 250 pounds if he loses 50 pounds a month. After an emotional farewell to his brother and father, reality sets in for him as he realizes the long road ahead of him. His usual manipulative tactics that he normally uses on his family are placed on the hospital nurses. Stephen abuses the call button, calling for the nurses over trivial matters constantly throughout the day. When his meal is a few minutes late, he rings the bell. When he's slightly uncomfortable, he rings the bell. He complains about other nurses and the length of time it takes for them to respond to his calls. He even has the gall to complain about the ethnicity of some of the hospital staff. He demands that his requests be dealt with immediately and isn't afraid to cause a scene when he feels like he's been waiting too long. His pathological behaviors started to show themselves, which catches the attention of Dr. Now. He gives Stephen a sharp wake-up call and threatens that if his behavior continues, then he will not be able to continue on this program.
I don't want to hear of this issue again.
Yes.
And if I do, then this is going to be a very different conversation.
Unsurprisingly, this doesn't work, and Stephen continues to abuse the hospital staff. One of the nurses recounts his behaviour with tears in her eyes. As Dr. Now learns of Stephen's behaviour, he quickly supports his hospital staff and gives Stephen a challenging ultimatum. If he wants to stay in the weight loss program, he must leave the hospital and prove that he's serious by losing the weight without the support he previously had. This is devastating for Stephen as he begs and cries to Dr. Now, but the doctor doesn't budge. Stephen breaks down, stating that he has nowhere else to go, but Dr. Now replies, "If you have nowhere else to go, I'll get you dropped off at a homeless shelter within the next few minutes." This is incredibly shocking for the viewer, as we've only ever seen Stephen bedbound and with 24/7 care and support. If Dr. Now threatens to drop him off at a homeless shelter, he must actually believe that Stephen is actually able to support himself much more than he lets on, explaining his attitude towards the hospital staff as he actually enjoys making them run circles around him. It's great to see how Dr. Now stands up for his hospital staff, as he puts them first ahead of his selfish patients. If you're familiar with these episodes, the vast majority of the stars share this similar behaviour. They are selfish, entitled, and believe that everyone around them owes them something. This is definitely true for Stephen, but there's something even more sinister about him that we will come to find out as we follow his story. When Stephen's father learns that he's being kicked out of the hospital, his reaction's quite surprising.
Why? Why is he doing this? When he knows this is his last opportunity to get help.
He doesn't seem angry that this has happened, but more as though he was anticipating it. He seems happy to fly to Houston and save Stephen, rather than teaching him a lesson by leaving him high and dry. You don't have to be a psychologist to understand Stephen's behaviour here. He has been allowed to do this as he pleases without facing any consequences. He can gorge his way to morbid obesity, sponge off the government to fund his life-threatening habits, and abuse hospital staff without facing any responsibility. It's clear that Stephen has never had to acknowledge his behaviour or try to improve because he's consistently been enabled by his father. This is quite common on the show, as more often than not, there is always one person behind them always picking up the pieces. And if you subscribe to my channel now, you won't miss out on any of the most shocking episodes of my £600 life, so make sure you're subscribed. Stephen has a final weigh-in before saying farewell and is surprised by his weight loss of over £100, making him £625. He must lose another £60 outside of the hospital in order to stay on the weight loss program and qualify for weight loss surgery. I can imagine it'll be extremely difficult for Stephen to continue losing weight without the help of the hospital staff. As soon as he arrives into his own apartment, he falls into his familiar habits, demanding that his father order him his signature large pepperoni pizza.
Give me your phone and get the number.
For what? For what?
Pizza.
Oh my God.
His father is definitely an enabler, as he doesn't even try to persuade Stephen to have a healthier alternative, even though he's literally on a weight loss program.
I learned a long time ago there's no point in fighting Stephen. If he wants pizza, he is going to get it.
It's difficult to see his point of view here too. What does he mean that there's no point in fighting with Stephen? He's over £600. It's not like he can just get up and start swinging at him. It's harsh, but the best course of action would be to hand him his allowed calories and just walk away, the same as Dr. Now did at the hospital. His father even asks Stephen for a slice, given that he hasn't eaten since his 6 AM flight, which Stephen shakes his head and shows him the finger. Stephen missed his first appointment with Dr. Now since being kicked out of the hospital. He's been calling his father to complain about this situation, and his brother Justin has been recording the conversations.
What do you want?
I want to talk to him.
Who do you want?
I ain't got no food here. If you don't believe me, ask Princess.
That's not my problem. That's your problem, not mine.
No, I did not get any food today.
You had 3 meals delivered. Sorry.
No, I did not.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
Well, guess what? I don't have no money and I am broke.
The conversations are difficult to listen to as Stephen and his father loudly argue over the phone. Stephen has a care worker called Princess who comes over each day to make his food and bathe him. Stephen lies to his father, claiming that Princess hasn't been delivering his food and that he hasn't eaten in days. His father knows this isn't true as he's in communication with Princess, and eventually he just puts the phone down on Stephen. It's been 2 months since Stephen left the hospital and he continues to miss his appointments with Dr. Now and fails to respond to any communication medication from the hospital. Princess starts to get concerned about Steven's behavior, so she turns up at his apartment to do a welfare check on him. She lets herself in to find that Steven isn't there and finds an empty bottle of pills. Worried about his condition, she calls the local hospitals to see if Steven is there, eventually locating him at the ER in a local hospital. Dr. Now investigates this and arrives at Steven's apartment for an at-home appointment. He finds that Steven has been abusing his medication and has become addicted to strong painkillers. He's also started pulling his hair out and is almost bald at the top of his head. Dr. Now comments that hair pulling is a childlike nervous disorder, calling Steven out for his inability to behave like an adult and take responsibility for his actions. Pizza boxes are mounting up around his room, and Dr. Now isn't confident that he's been sticking to his 1,000 calorie a day diet. This isn't even the worst part. Steven's been admitting himself into different hospitals in the area and claiming to be in intense pain in order to get prescribed high dosage pain medication. Steven was prescribed pain medication at 20 different hospitals in only 1 month. Not only is he addicted to food, but he now has a fully fledged pain medication addiction too. This is incredibly serious, as Steven's addiction to the pain medication is likely to kill him before his morbid obesity does, cutting his life shorter and shorter. Dr. Now gives Steven an ultimatum: lose 60 pounds in 1 month and stop taking the pain medication, or he's out of the program for good. Steven acts like he's feeling motivated to change, but it's easy to see that he isn't going to. At the weigh-in, Steven steps on the scales and is astounded to learn that he's gained yet another 80 pounds since he left the hospital several months prior. Dr. Now emphasizes the seriousness of Steven's situation, but this doesn't really register with him at all, as he asks Dr. Now will refill his pain medication one last time. In disbelief, Dr. Now fully rejects him. On the way back to Steven's apartment, he started to complain of severe leg pain and was asked to be rushed to the hospital. When the hospital nurses came to assess his situation, he claims to have a stabbing pain that measures a 9 out of 10 on the pain scale, all while smiling and sitting comfortably. His care worker Princess is visibly annoyed by Steven's lies. If someone was really experiencing a 9 out of 10, they would be unable to speak, move, or even describe that level of pain. For Steven, it's just yet another manipulative tactic to get what he wants. No matter how much anyone tries to help him, he finds a way to take advantage of it. Dr. Now is more than done with Steven's games. He's suspended from his weight loss program and is instead redirected to a drug rehab program. This is the last time we see him in the first episode, but there is so much more to come. The Where Are They Now episode takes place 2 years after Steven was originally in the show. The viewer is introduced to a slightly more independent Steven, who has moved to Iowa to be with his girlfriend, who he marries during the filming of the episode, and I was just as shocked as you were to learn that. 2 years after dropping out of Dr. Now's weight loss program, Steven reaches out to him again for help. On a video call, Dr. Now evaluates his situation and discovers that he's in a very similar place to where he left him. He hasn't lost any weight, despite having the surgery, which isn't in the show, and still struggles with the same medical conditions he previously had. His eating habits are the only factor that have changed. In fact, it's actually gotten worse, with Steven going from eating 2 large pizzas a day to 5. He even explains that he can't go longer than 2 hours without eating. As Steven has been eating so much since having the gastric sleeve surgery, he's actually stretched his stomach back to what it was before the operation, meaning he's practically starting again from day 1. His main reason for weight loss is due to his wife, as she's threatened to divorce him if he doesn't get down to a healthy weight. Steven's wife seems like a genuinely nice person, as she makes him daily healthy meals which he refuses to eat, instead calling his father to order him a pizza, which he does every time without fail. It's upsetting to see how Steven's father is enabling him to maintain his obese size, despite the threat that Steven has nearly died because of his weight. It's hard to understand why someone would want to be in a relationship with someone like Steven too, especially as he shows no effort to want to improve himself in any way. Steven pleads with Dr. Now that he will behave himself properly if he's allowed back into the weight loss program at the hospital, not shouting at nurses and being rude to the hospital staff. Unfortunately for Steven, Dr. Now sees sense and rejects him for the weight loss program, as he hasn't showed any effort to lose weight on his own. He has practically undone all of the work that Dr. Now and his team did during the program, instead progressing backwards as he's eating more than ever before, worsening his health conditions even further. With other participants on the show, we often feel enlightened by their motivation to recognize their unhealthy habits and efforts to live a better life. With Steven, it's the complete opposite. It's not surprising that he's left the show in a worse place than when he first started. Despite brief moments of progress, this is often short-lived, as as Stephen falls back into his disgusting habits. His lack of accountability is a central factor in this downfall. He blames everyone around him instead of himself, using threats and manipulation to get what he wants. He's completely toxic in every way possible, and it's entirely likely his habits will be the death of him. And if you want to see the stars that did actually lose their life on the show, click the video that's on your screen now, and I'll see you in the next one.
And so highly recommend you go and follow Big Craig, 31,000 followers.